Hey guys, welcome to another JSCC parenting moment. Been praying for you. I know this is a weird time. I mean, it's a time full of lots of unknowns and unanswered questions, lots of anxiety taking place. Yeah, our seniors who've just graduated are wondering what next year is going to hold for them, right? Um, my daughter just graduated kindergarten, is moving into first grade. There's still questions about what next year is going to look like and hold for us. What's the summer going to look like? What is our church reopening going to look like? I mean, on and on it goes. There's lots of questions for us to try to figure out together, and questions aren't something to be afraid of, but often we are. There's a story told about Albert Einstein. That once he was traveling and there was a young Indian man seated next to him, and it was going to be quite a long journey. And Einstein leaned over to this young man and said, "Hey, let's play a game while we travel together." And he said, "Let's ask each other questions." And the young man thought, "Okay, I'm talking to Einstein here. What am I going to ask, right?" And so Einstein said, "Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask you a question, and if you can't answer the question, then you give me $50." And the young man thought, "Wow, that's a lot to lose, right?" But Einstein then said, "But then you can ask me a question, and if I can't answer it, I'll give you $500." Now the young man started thinking, surely, even though this is Albert Einstein, there's got to be something out there that Einstein doesn't know that I can ask, right? So he decides to bite and takes on Einstein's challenge. So Einstein goes first, and he says to this young man, he says, "What's the distance between Earth and the moon?" And the young man begins to think, and he goes, "Listen, I'm from India. We're a land full of scientists and engineers. I mean, surely I know this. I've been taught this at some point. Why can't I think of it?" And so finally, the young man reaches into his wallet, pulls out $50, and gives it to Einstein. And Einstein says, "Okay, now it's your turn to ask me a question." So the young man thinks for a moment, and then he looks at Einstein and he says, "What goes up the mountain with three legs and comes down with four?" Einstein begins to think and becomes restless. And he works through all the algorithms in his mind and everything, and he can't come up with an answer at all. Finally, Einstein, after a while, reaches into his pocket, pulls out $500, and hands it to the young man. Well, it's Einstein's turn again. So Einstein says, "Well, now, before I ask my next question, I just have to know what the answer to your question is. Tell me, what's the answer to your question? What goes up the mountain with three legs and comes down with four?" At that, the young man reaches into his wallet, pulls out $50, and hands it to Einstein. Questions. I mean, questions are everywhere. We're questioners. That's part of who we are. That's part of the way we're created. That we would have a mind seeking and looking for things. Our kids are seeking knowledge right now. Our kids are questioning things right now. I know a lot of times we look at particularly our younger kids and we go, "Man, what's up with all these questions?" And some of us are tempted to say things like, "Man, I'm ready for this phase to be over with," right? Now, I've challenged you before to rethink that whole thought. And instead of saying, "I want this phase to be over with," instead to say, "You know what, this is just a phase and I don't want to miss it." Um, and I want to encourage you with that because it's really important that we not miss their questions. Because the idea of questions is that they are learning. And so you are the greatest influencer in their life. And so if they're asking questions, you're helping them learn. But if they're not asking questions, they're not learning, at least not from you, right? I think about Jesus' response. Jesus often would answer a question with a question. He didn't do that to frustrate people, but to get them involved in the process and to reveal what they already knew to be true a lot of times. And I think that's one of the things we can do with our kids. There's great wisdom in doing that. I think about the way comedy works. When you have two people doing comedy together, you usually have the comedic person, the funny guy, and then you have the straight guy, the guy that sets them up. I mean, think about Jeff Foxworthy and his panel of guys that he gets up and does their routine with. Someone's always setting someone up so that the comedy keeps going. You never want the comedy to end with you because if it does, it shuts down the routine. And so you're constantly working back and forth with each other and setting it up so that it keeps moving and keeps evolving. So watch that next time you see a comedy routine, how they play off of each other to keep it going and keep it moving so that you're engaged. It's the same thing that needs to happen with you and your children. You need to keep engaging them, and instead of just settling on an answer that's simple and easy for you and saying, okay, that's done, that's resolved, and then moving on, understand that if you can keep the conversation moving regularly and keep more conversation, more questions happening and thinking, you're going to propel your child toward greater learning and understanding. You're going to be a great influencer and teacher in their life by doing that. I think about the fact that there are many key critical conversations that we need to be having with our kids. Um, so weeks ago, when our yard first started coming in for this year, it came in with all these weeds. Now, last year we had a beautiful backyard, and this year it came in and there were just weeds everywhere, and we were really frustrated. And my wife decided that what she was going to do was each evening go out, and she did this for about 4 or 5 nights. She went out and spent 2 to 3 hours each night with a bag and some gloves and an e-pad, and she just pulled weeds until every weed was out of our backyard, and the yard looked great. Really impressed by the hard work she did. But a week later, she saw another weed or two and went out and pulled them. And then the next week, there were some more weeds, and she went and pulled them. And still, like 5, 6 weeks later, there's weeds, and she's like so frustrated, going, "Man, I wish I could just pull the weeds once, and that would be enough." And it really made me think about our conversations with our children. Um, you know, sometimes we think that we can just answer a question with our kids or have one conversation with our kids and that's enough, and that we can then move on. But it's really not. Because here's what's happening. While you and I may have the conversation with our kids once, the world's still having the conversation with them. For instance, we talk about the talk, the sex talk, right? Even calling it the talk ruins it because it implies that it's a one time thing. Hey, mom and dad had the talk with me. Well, unfortunately, that's where it ends with a lot of people is that they have the talk once and then they don't have a talk again. And so our kids, though, are still having the talk. They're just not having it with you. They're having it with every magazine they pick up, every song that they listen to on the radio, every movie that they watch. They're having it in the classroom. They're having it in the locker room. They're having it on the playing field. It's going on all around them constantly. The talk is constantly taking place in their life. And if you are going to have the talk once and think it's settled and moved on, you're going to find your child is going to be headed for some heartache and some disappointment because your voice is eventually going to fade and be drowned out by all the other conversations that are happening. And so what I want to encourage you to do is to have that conversation as an ongoing, open conversation, not something that you've addressed once and you stop. But keep having the conversation with your kids. I think you need to do the same thing with the God talk. So when you start to talk about God, when they're a little kid, we start talking about who God is and he's this great father and this creator and on and on. But we need to keep having the God talk with our kids all the way through life. Talking about the great forgiver, the great healer, the great restorer, all of the wonderful things that God is, the great healer, so that they are hearing from you because they're hearing from the world. The world's telling them that those who believe in God are believing in some kind of a myth or an antiquated idea. The world is telling them that those who believe in God are foolish because God doesn't exist. On and on it goes. Or, wait, there's a different kind of God that you need to be listening to, not the one that you were taught in your youth. And so we want to help our kids through this process understand what it means to listen to God. And so we have to keep this conversation going. There are lots of conversations like that we need to be having. I mean, what about creation? That's a conversation that they're having at school all the time. And if we're not constantly talking to them about God the Creator, if we think we've answered the question once because we did the 7 days of creation during VBS one year or something, um, we're going to run into some struggles with our kids. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is understand that if you're not continually weeding your child's yard, if you will, their mind, the weeds are going to grow in. And to borrow from one of the parables of Jesus, the weeds will choke them out. So don't be afraid of questions, and instead question. Ask questions. Question things yourself. Seek answers, and seek answers together. Teach your children how to open up the Bible, a physical copy of the Bible, and look at it, and to ask questions for themselves. And when you don't know the answer, don't be afraid to just say, I don't know, but we can find out together. And then go to the Word and seek out an answer, or call somebody who might be able to help guide you. But help your kid. Don't just have these conversations once and think that's enough, because the weeds will come back and they will take control and they will choke out your child. Let me pray with you guys. God, would you help us to realize that we are all questioners, and that behind every question is a questioner. It's a person. And behind every questioner is some preconceived ideas, some prejudices, some beliefs, and some truths, and some half-truths, and some just confusion. And what we have a responsibility to do as parents is to help guide our kid through all of that, to help guide our kids through the confusion that's out there, so that they learn to hear clearly from us, the greatest physical influencer on this earth, and to hear from your son Jesus, the greatest spiritual influencer on this earth. That God, that they might be able to learn your heart. God, I pray that you would bind Satan today, so that our kids are no longer plagued by him, and that they're no longer getting the talk about any subject from him, but that, God, they can hear clearly from you. God, I thank you for these parents and how brave they are and how much they love their kids and how tired they are. So I ask that you give them all energy. Help them to know they're doing a good job. Even if they haven't been having a talk with their kids lately, they're doing a good job, because they love their kids fiercely and they want nothing to happen to their kids. And that's because the love that you put in their hearts first. So God, help them in this process. For these single parents, God, give them so much more wisdom, and bring alongside of them godly men and women who can help them to have these conversations with their children, to love their children so that their children are obedient to you and bring you glory. Thank you for Jesus, and the fact that through Jesus we're part of your family and we become your sons and daughters. Thank you for being a good father to us. It's in Jesus that I pray. Amen. Hey guys, God bless you. If you need any help with anything, reach out to me, to Jason, to Elizabeth, to any of our staff, any of our elders. We'd love to help you as you move forward in your parenting. Look forward to talking to you again next week. Blessings.